Let's start out by first of all welcoming our all of our wonderful um,
Audience.
audience. Um, I'd like to initially apologize for the last time we tried to do this, or at least I tried to do this. Mike was quite successful. I wasn't. I had some technical issues with my power, and that made it rather difficult for me to join. By the time I had things resurrected and corrected, it was too late. So, hence, we're here for what we're going to call the second period of this topic. And we're going to go into a little more depth this time. So, hopefully, the first one is just a sampler of what's going on. But please, in the comments, please introduce yourself, say hello, tell us where you're from, and you can do that all the while Mike and I do a little quick introduction of each other or of ourselves to everyone. Why don't you go ahead, Mike?
Well, I'm going to be the translator to Brian because he likes his memes and his analogies to butterflies and so on and so forth. So when we talk about the sports analogy, for example, puck clutching, it's really about in real life overanalyzing different things and people getting caught up and worrying and stressing for effectively nothing. If you control what you can control. We'll be talking about that effectively, right, Brian?
We will. And I'm Brian Crew. I am a hockey coach and convener. I have been for many years. On the other side of the coin, I'm also a business owner, a sales consultant and coach, and a proprietor of a sales system. And with Mike, we offer a service called Grow Pro. And Grow Pro is a really interesting top to the bottom of your sales funnel service, which has incredible ROIs. It's cheaper than hiring someone and will produce more than having a team. So I'll just leave it at that because we're here today to talk hockey and sales. And the analogy. So let me kind of preface this with, as we're doing introductions, I want to preface this as sort of where this whole idea came from. And I was talking with a fellow coach of mine who's also a business owner. And we were, interestingly enough, having a conversation over coffee and catching up. And we were talking about the hockey season and we were talking about our businesses. And I got lost in the conversation between what we were talking about, because from the context of what we were talking about, I couldn't tell whether we were talking about business or hockey. And it just kind of dawned on me that a lot of the things we do as coaches work in the real world too, and apply, especially to something like sales, where I'll say the athlete's performance or the salesperson's performance, their mental attitude, the where they are, how they're feeling, whether they're tired or energized, all those things make a big difference in how they perform. So we thought of, hey, that sort of made me think a little bit about, being in a slump. I was having a conversation with a prospect, and they were in a sales slump. And Mike, I'm sure we've all been in sales slumps. Sometimes they're more in our head. Sometimes they're more real. Sometimes you can track them with numbers. Sometimes it just is a feeling that you're in a slump. I know I kind of get that feeling after, and this happens every once in a while. You have a consecutive run of, I don't want to call them bad calls, but unsuccessful calls where you're not moving the needle from the sales perspective, not a fit people, which, is sometimes just as good to figure out someone's not a fit as it is to figure out someone is a fit, because you can stop wasting your time. But that whole piece, if you get a whole bunch of those in a row, it starts to feel like you're not doing something right. You're in a slump, and then you start trying too hard, and we'll get into all that kind of components we go through. But you start trying too hard, You start holding in hockey terminology. The same thing happens in hockey. You'll have a star player who goes into slumps, and if you're a sports fan, and you watch any kind of high level professional or high amateur level sports, you know this for sure that regardless of how good a player is, they go into slumps. They start in hockey. We say you're holding your stick too tight. You're overthinking things. You're doing things that you just get into your head, and you get into a pattern of things that aren't helpful. Sometimes it's because we drift off from what we should be doing. Sometimes it's just, I'm going to say a matter of luck. Whatever it is, I'm not sure, but hey, please jump in the comment section and give us a shout and say hello. We will be sure to respond. If you guys ever want to talk more about this, we'll mention this at the end as well. But right off the top, if you want to learn more about what we do or anything we do, just, if you type hockey in the comments, we will get back to you. If you do it on our post about this event, we will get back to you. And Mike, I'm going to pass it over to you to kind of wrap up our introduction piece and anything you want to kind of add to what I had to say.
Well, it's not about mindset that we're talking about. We're not talking about, we're just talking about some tactical steps to get out of the slump, the stuff that you control. The difference between the sports analogy that we're talking about and real life in terms of business is that unlike the athletes, and we're watching them play, we can tell they're slumping. The customer can't tell.
Hopefully not anyways.
Well, unless you show it to them because you're desperate for a sale, for example, that's when the customer knows. And they don't really like to be in that position to begin with. So you have to keep that internal. So part of our stuff from avoiding the mindset is to say, okay, here's what the actions you can do. That way you stay focused on giving the customer the best experience possible with what you want to represent, right?
Right. Yep. So we're going to start with the fact that you're in a slump. And if you're a hockey player and you're in a slump, you're about to start the first period of the game. As your coach, one of my pieces of advice is going to be is to go out there and get into the game, to finish your check, as we call it in hockey, which is go in there and get into the game. Make sure you're physically in the game. You're skating hard. When you're checking someone, you don't stop checking them before you finish checking them. You finish that check off. Make sure you go feel the game. We often call it, right? So you get out there and you grind in, you make body contact, you get in people's way, you forecheck hard, you back check hard, you skate hard. You just play hard. Don't worry about scoring. Don't worry about shooting. This is just about really getting into the game and putting in 100% effort into all the things you should be doing. A great example of that is I had a top center player on my team, and he get caught up always trying to win the game for us because he was our best player, and he would hold his stick too tight, and I'd always direct him, start playing solid defense in our end. He was a great two-way player, so he would just start checking your guy on our end, and inevitably what would always happen is he would be in our end, he'd check a guy, force a turnover, move the puck up out of our end, follow up on the play, the puck would end up on his stick, and bang, he'd score a goal and everything would start going well for him. But it was always that piece is the thing he was forgetting to do. He was trying to score and trying to win the game for us, which is what your sales guys will do. But what would happen is he would forget to do all the things he needed to do to score. Which is doing the checking part. So that's my hockey piece.
Yeah, and like you said or asked earlier, I have been in slumps or I've been in situations where do I go? So most of my career foundation is being that first sales for innovative solutions or being an enterprise and leading the way into new markets as an example. So I don't really have a playbook to work with. I have to create it as I go. because I'm accountable for the sales they're expecting for that. So when I've done it individually or with teams, I've been basically saying, you got to make sure the little things are done. Are you going after the right customer? They call it ICP, your ideal customer profile. Are you approaching them the correct way for that particular market? What is it that, coming back to Brian's point, when you're physically contacting them, what's going on? Because the physicality in sales is the rapport, the communication, the relationship, similar to what the physical is in hockey. So I always bring them, if it's a team, individually and together as a team, go back to answer that question. And what's their profile? So what sector, what's the best companies in there? What are the issues they're facing? We also know two different things. What did they say they want versus what they need? And this is relevant to whether it's a service or a product-based type of focus. When you're outreaching to them, today you might think it's limited because of the traditional cold outreach, which is by email or by phone. But we also have different channels that we didn't have back then, such as this webinar, podcast, what you might post, what you might comment on a potential customer's post, and so on and so forth. So there's different ways you do the outreach. So the second part, besides identifying who you want to target, is how you're going to do that messaging. And today it's not as direct as it used to be. And what I mean by that is, before, sales was the one holding the information and imparting it to the customer. Today, the customer has the internet. They don't need you to go and research. So you have to come at it in a different way, sometimes indirect, in terms of asking questions. So but you can go beyond the traditional outreach, as far as calls and emails, to posting what you feel is the solution on a LinkedIn platform. But it could also be on Medium, it could be on Substack, it could be on a number of different platforms, networking platforms like Alignable, EO for the bigger organizations, and so on. And when you do that and you hit the mark, you got to stop. Don't sell. Go and ask exactly where their expectations are. Ask the questions. Say, I'm only asking because I don't know. And that's a better way of approaching this type of market right now, because I'll finish with this. HubSpot and Reddit came up and said, in your ideal customer profile today, across industries, the 5% that are ready to buy now, the ones you really, really want, 70% of them are already chosen the vendor. So imagine if you do a cold outreach to that 70%, you might actually piss off the customer you're trying to win with the way you're approaching them. So it's better to think of the 95% and approach them in saying, here's why we think this is what you actually need versus what you want, and how you message that. And that's how to get out of the slump. Brian?
And I think, kind of connecting the dots between the two, it's looking at your playbook, getting back to doing the basics, doing the right things. I think a lot of times too, when we're in a slump in the sales world, you look for you're looking for something easy, something to fall into your lap. And the reality is get back to the basics, do your butterfly approach as opposed to being a mosquito and buzzing people. I get another analogy in there. I think it's the common thing. It's the same thing in hockey, right? It's like, get back to the basics of the game, do what you're supposed to do, and everything will start happening for you.
Yeah, we'll get into it in a second, but to add to what you just said, when you do get contact, like your analogy, you got to be ready. Somebody that inquires on your post, your comments, replies to your email or whatever, don't be taking 2 days to answer. You got to answer like right away. And, that's where some of the tools and help from the company can come into play, where you answer it in a personalized fashion. But we'll get into that in a second. But 5 minutes, you got 5 minutes to respond.
Yeah.
or less than that today.
So next we get into our second period, and we might be a little bit behind the other team on the scorecard here because we've been getting back to the basics. So we might be down, but we're not out of the game yet. And so as you can see on our scoreboard here, it's the second period. We got a full period to go, and the other team's up, but we're going to score a goal. In the hockey world, that's kind of where I go. To get back, and I call it a greasy goal because it's not about, one of those high skill,
An ugly goal.
just an ugly goal, like put the puck to the net, bang around rebounds, get a cheap deflection, bounce it off something. Every goal counts the same, whether it's, a very pretty three-way passing play or something that bounces off the defenseman's shin pad. They both count the same. And so, just we're aiming to do that, get the puck, get the pucks to the net, and just keep working it. I remember I had a great guy who hadn't scored all season, and he was on my team. And he obviously he's desperate to score. He had a good piece, a good scoring touch to him. But I just kept driving him and getting him just stay in front of that net, just stand in front of that net. He was really good at holding his ground in front of the net and scooping up rebounds. And so I just kept having it. And he must have, I don't know how many shots he took. It was multiple games where he hit posts, hit toes, hit skate blades, put it in the goalie's glove. The goalie made amazing saves. He had so many chances and couldn't score. And then eventually he just kept, he kept getting wanting to do something different. And I kept telling him, no, just stay in front of that net and just keep gobbling up those loose pucks. And he kept doing it. And eventually he got a greasy goal, just put in a cheap rebound and turned it around and he just started scoring. He ended up that was early on in the season. He was like last in scoring on our team. I think he was actually the last forward to score a goal, but by the end of the season, he ended up as one of our top goal scorers on the team. And I could see it in him the whole time. I could see it in him. I knew he had it in him. I knew he was going to be a good goal scorer. It just, he just needed, and he was just, I don't know, bad luck, whatever, or getting all his misses at once, right? Like sometimes that happens too. We always talk numbers in sales, and the same happens in hockey. You're not going to score on every shot. You're going to have a scoring percentage. You might take 10 shots and not score in any of them, and then the next 10 you're going to score in every one. And the same thing can happen in sales. And seems to, tell me if it's different for you, Mike, but I find it's that way. I find that in sales, I often hit streaks where, I talk to 5 people, 0 traction, no one's a fit, and the next 5 people all close.
Well, the expression I heard was it never rains. In other words, sales don't come in steadily just because you want to. It pours. And like you said, if you're consistent, loosen up your grip, stay active, get physical, it'll eventually come in. And a lot of times my sales came in bunches. I would close, depending on which business or industry, 2 or 3 this week, blank for 6. Then 10 more right after. But that's because I was consistent in the system. And this is the underlying thing of what we're talking about, because we're talking about the individual players, they're being tight and whatnot. But when you go out to market, you have to have an underlying system of how you're going to outreach to them, what you're going to do on a steady basis. Right now, the average salesperson spends 30% of their time on sales. Well, hello, that's why your sales are down. So how do you remove that 70% that is hanging over your head? So in my case, I agree to look for the ugly goal. I call it, the small wins, or since you're rubbing off on me, the 3 monkeys, because the 3 monkeys are you just started or you've been at it for a while, but you got the manager on your case about the sales. So in contrast to Brian, the coach is going, okay, buddy, you're my top scorer. What the heck? Let's go. So you want to get that monkey off. So coming back to Brian's analogy, that first win. So if I use a fake set of pricing, your service or product is $10, $100, $1,000. Just get the $10 one. Get a couple of them. It has a way of really juicing you from the mojo perspective, but it reemphasizes that you're not going nuts. You're actually pretty good. You can close the small deals. Now you've got the first monkey off. Now you got the $10 and you did it in, like, let's say 60 or 90 days. Okay, well, now go after the second one, $100, but do it in half the time. And when you focus on that and you get the second monkey off your back, by the time you get to the third one, you get the $1,000 one, and you do it in 15 days. Now, it's an analogy. The pricing are not actual. I'm just saying that the cadence and the monkey that you want to get off is in that framework. So how does the system work? Well, your system works in terms of you've identified the ideal customer profile. You've identified what you want to do in messaging. You're testing the messaging to see what works, because here's what the company wants to do. You're finding it has to be something different in order to close. And you start to figure out with the $10 one, oh, it should be tweaked this way. With the $100 one, it should be tweaked this way. This is the crack the code messaging, because sales is pivoted on messaging. Messaging meaning communication, what you send out, how you talk, what you say to people. Are you animated like I'm doing right now in talking to people, right? Here's 3 things you need to know before I let you go, sir or madam, right? First thing is you need this, and I get it, and we have it. But we found out that this second one is really what you want. And the total package is we make sure you're taken care of with the third option. I'll leave that with you.
And yeah, it's interesting, Mike. I have a very similar analogy I use. Of course, she knows I use analogy. I use a baseball one a lot of times with my clients, and it's going for singles, doubles, triples, or home runs. And,
yeah, exactly. That's a good one.
As we all know, the ideal is to load the bases and get a grand slam home run. But you know what? As long as you're hitting a single, just go out there and try and make contact. What is it? They always say, the baseball investors say, like, just go out there and make some contact, hit some balls, and some of them are going to get through. It's true, right? It's such a true analogy, and so relevant to sales. The same thing's going to happen if you get out there and just start making some sales calls. Some of them are, at some point your ball's just going to squeak through the infield, and you're going to get a base hit. And you don't have to, and you don't have to swing for the fences. Like a lot of times, we all know those when you talk your 10, 100, 1,000, the 10 sales are easier to do. Right, it's a lot easier. The bigger the dollar figure, the harder it is to get someone to buy.
Yeah,
inevitable. So if you start selling your lower end product, especially when you're in a slump, it's gonna be an easier sale. You can do, typically most organizations, when they have that 10, 100,000, they have usually if you took their total revenues and divided among those 3 categories, they would all be equal. You're going to have a few really big ones, medium-sized bunch of middle ones, and a lot of small ones. And that's typically, and those 3 numbers, when you add them all up, it means you're going to have 10 times as many smalls as mediums and 10 times as many mediums as larges. But that's typically what really ends up happening. Is so if you have those 3 pieces, they'll tend to be, the revenues will tend to be kind of fairly equal. So you can go get, 10 little sales for every medium sale. So try not to swing for the fences. Don't go for the biggest guy. Don't go for that perfect client, the one who's going to, pay for your retirement. That's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for something small and sweet.
So let's bring you to the third period where we want to win.
we want to win the game in the third period. So now we've got a few goals. We've tied up the game. Everything's looking good. We're coming into that home stretch in the third game. And so now it's just about winning that game. And I have a great piece for this where I have my son on my team. This was in U15, and he was the best player on our team. I have to say that modestly. We had defense and goalies. These are U15 boys, so they're a lot of them are 14 years old. A lot of the boys just weren't always emotionally or attitudinally there and wanting to win. My son always was. He's just that. He's a very competitive and straightforward guy. And so a lot of times I just threw him on the ice and said, "Go win the game." And literally he would do that. He would be able to, I mean, he would make a power forward move and drive to the net and get us a goal. He would just, what he did do was he just found a new, the other thing you hear this expression, found another gear. He would just he would go from 110% effort to 120% effort. And putting that extra effort in would just power him past any objections, any resistance, any obstacles, and let him get that goal that he needed to win the game. So that is kind of the piece at the end is, now you've got some traction, you got some success from the first two periods. You're doing everything you're supposed to do. You're getting some small wins. Okay. So now again, I'm not saying go after the whale and go after the biggest win possible. Not every game is the Game 7 overtime to Stanley Cup final. You just want to get the win. So get out there, work hard, really hustle, put in some extra effort to get the win, whatever the win is for you. But it's going to get you back on track and feeling that groove again. So just, go out there and do it. It may be, finding something in your, go through your funnel and find something where there was someone was stuck at an obstacle. They couldn't get over a certain point to get a sale. Just go find them and drive that baby home and go sit with them and go, okay, what do we, have that conversation really blunt and forceful, right? What do I have to do to win your deal? Like, what's the obstacle? Let's get over it and let's move forward and let's get working together. So that's kind of the hockey side of that, Mike. I'll pass it over to you to kind of win the game in the sales side.
Well, one thing that came to mind when we talked about this before this webinar is, the dopamine hit that you can get when you get into that state. Not the words drug dealers or anything like that, but the whole euphoric moment of winning a sale, and how do you keep that momentum going? When you asked me, what was been the experience on different teams, it's the same story as what we've talked about for different teams. But in one case, they were down. And for everyone in the audience, a bit of the background is most of the teams I've been asked to help run or take over, I inherited. And the option of changing them or whatever wasn't really at the forefront, because the expectation was to deliver oftentimes at least at 1 million more than what they've been doing up till that point. And in this particular case, they were down. And we know that confidence is a big part of sales, but their issue was self-esteem. So how do you get the self-esteem correct before you get to the confidence, before you get to the win? So it's a bit of a challenge, but I kept the same outline that Brian and I have given you earlier. Who's our customer? How you're outreaching them? And contrary to many, managers out there, I'm getting the team involved with how do we solve this to be able to move forward. I don't see that all the time in today's businesses. And out of the blue, they tell me, well, we're missing an important customer segment that we haven't approached. So I said, well, then how do we approach them? And some of the quick numbers is that when we did the outreach that Brian was suggesting, as far as getting physical contact, is we had 2,900 new leads. but before we went and talked to them, because some of them were because of the type of service and product was both consumer and business, I said just focus on the individual consumer first. Just get the first win. And when they got 12, wow, did that ever change the mood in that first month of that? And the next thing you know, out of the blue, 3 months later, we get one of the largest, business to business deals that they ever saw over the last 5 years. So that continued the momentum going forward. And the result was in less than 9 months, they were top 30 in branch worldwide out of 300. And one of the individuals I was working with was one of the top 30 in the rankings of the individuals from these various branches. And for the first time in 10 years, they were over 500,000, and we were just under 1 million to reach for the first time in 10 years. And the person that brought the big deal wasn't even the one that was in the top 30. So it was a real collective approach on the premise of what Brian and I just outlined. Brian?
So I think that kind of brings us to our final overtime period, our wrap up of this whole piece. I think one of the interesting pieces of all this is there really is an analogy. The analogy really does hold true between what you would do to a coach when you're coaching a pro athlete or an athlete with what you would do to a salesperson. I think the analogy works the same. It really, it resonates. So if anything we said to you, you find at least been interesting, we've tried to bring this into an interesting prospect of how, kind of highlighting how our skill set of coaching salespeople and helping them achieve, because at the end of the day, we do a lot of different things from, helping people with their target audiences, their ICPs, their sales strategy, their process, their sales operations, prospecting, closing, whatever it is that the help is needed, we're there to help. And this is just one example of what we can do. We found a kind of a cheeky way of kind of connecting the dots and making it interesting for you all. So if anyone's really interested in learning more about this or has any challenges they want to talk through, we'll have an initial conversation with you for free. So if you type hockey at the end, we will set up a quick 30-minute call with you and have that free session and delve into how we might be able to help you. So I want to thank everyone for attending. Mike, thank you again. For always a pleasure and a lot of fun to do these webinars with you. We will be back shortly in a few weeks with another exciting webinar topic.
Thanks, everyone.